All right, welcome back. So now I want to keep moving forward in another cooking process in which we're going to be using a vegetable. So what we're going to be doing is actually boiling or simmering, but I'll go through that in a second. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a potato puree. And the reason I picked potatoes is because, once again, one of the most widely used products or vegetables in the world. Potatoes are everywhere. Almost every country is eating some form of potato in some way. The reason they get a bad rap is because they come in French fries in the fast food restaurants or the quick serve restaurants, and that's usually not a good product. They're not even a real true potato in some cases. And when they are, they're cooked in horrible fat with tons of sodium and preservatives so that they last forever. So today though, I'm going to take and show you how to use one of the potatoes. So there's there's about 3 categories of potatoes. There's really 2 that are main categories, and then the third category is really all about specialty style potatoes. But the 2 main potatoes that we have, that we use are what's referred to as a waxy potato or a starchy potato. Those is for that starch content. The other one is what's referred to as like a waxy potato, which are usually like the small red ones or the little white ones. They're going to be really good for they hold up really well with potato salads and roasting as well and boiling. So those are 2 different classifications of potato. There are others out there. There's heirloom potatoes that are like fingerlings or Yukon Golds. Yukon Golds are really like a mix of between a starchy and a waxy potato. And this can be used for mashing as well. But today we're going to use a starchy potato, which is referred to as a russet potato. And you can see here on the camera, I went ahead and I did peel my potatoes already. And I wanted to do peeled potatoes today just for it's easier to show with. I normally make my potato puree with the peel on. Like I said the other day in the last lesson, a lot of vegetables have a lot of nutritional value in the peel. The potatoes are no different. They have a lot of nutritional value in their peel. You just need to make sure you scrub it really well and clean it really well. But for today's lesson, I went ahead and peeled them just so you can see, and people don't always like the peel, and that's fine. So this is the way I'm going to show you today, and it is a little bit easier to work with when you're trying to get them pureed. So when you do peel potatoes, especially a starchy potato, you have to put it into water. Once you get that peel off of the potato, it'll start to oxidize or turn brown. So unless you want a brown potato puree, which most people don't, you do want to get those submerged in some kind of water as soon as you peel it. Don't wait, because it will happen really quick with a potato. So I've got 3 medium potatoes here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take and cut these up into a large or even bigger than that cut. The cut doesn't really matter. What really matters is that they're all roughly the same size. So if I just take and you can tell, when you run your knife through a potato and it wants to stick to your knife like so, that's because of the starch that's in the potato. So the higher the starch content, the more it wants to stick. And you can see that's on there, pretty good. So just be careful when you're doing your potatoes. Then all I have to do is take, once I cut down through the center, once again, just cut through, all fairly about the same size. And these I'm going to take and just put these right into my pot, which I've got some water over here to the side. So you can see I've got water in there so that they're not really staying out of the water that much. So let's go ahead and cut these up. And then with potatoes, with cooking potatoes, and this is the pot that I'm going to cook my potatoes in, so I went ahead and put cold water into the pot already. And the reason being is you always want to cook your potatoes in cold water and then bring it up to temperature. And if you don't, if you put your potatoes into boiling water, what's going to happen is it's going to cook your potato on the outside and get mushy and whatnot, be falling apart before the inside of the potato is done. So potatoes are really sensitive to that. So you want to make sure that you start your potatoes in cold water and then bring it up. The other thing I can say about that is you want to add salt. And so the rule is with adding salt to water to add flavor, depending on what you're cooking, if you're going to strain your water out, so like potatoes, we're going to strain the water out. Pasta, you're going to strain the water out when you're cooking pasta. Vegetables, when you're cooking vegetables, boiling vegetables in water, is you want to add more salt than you think you're gonna need. And I always say, make it salty like the sea. So if you've ever been, you know, at the beach, you got dunked in the water, you wanna make it salty like the sea. So the reason is that the water is gonna be poured out. If you don't add a lot of salt to it, then you're gonna have bland potatoes. And if you don't, or if you do add enough salt to it, what's gonna happen is that salt's gonna come into your potato, it's gonna be absorbed a little bit, but not all of it, and it's gonna help flavor your potato. Now, if you're doing something like rice, where your rice is gonna absorb all the water, you wanna just salt it just a little bit, because if you salt it too much, all of that salt will be into your rice and it'll be almost inedible. So what I'm gonna do is grab my salt, got my container here, and I want you to be able to see, you know, kind of how much salt is gonna go into this. So I've got quite a bit, and this is my coarse sea salt. 1, 2, 3, 4 good pinches there. That's a pretty good amount of salt. And like I said, I want that salt to be able to flavor my potatoes. It's not gonna be all absorbed because all that water is gonna be poured out, and we're just gonna reserve the potatoes when we puree them. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and put this pot on the stove. I'm gonna bring it to a boil, and as soon as it comes to a boil, I'm gonna turn it down to a simmer. So once I get these on, I'll come back and I'll show you how to get your ingredients ready to make your potato puree and the equipment you're gonna need and why for pureeing your potatoes. All right, be right back. All right, so behind me, I've got the potatoes on the stovetop. I've got it at, you know, on the high as it'll go right now. What I want is I wanna bring it up to a boil and then just start to simmer. I don't want to really boil the potatoes because boiling is going to be wanting to break them apart and beat them up really bad. So I really just want to, you know, turn it down to a low simmer, not like a light simmer, but a, you know, medium to low simmer. The other thing is about the time it comes to that boil or just below that boil, I want to start checking them for doneness because I don't want to overcook my potatoes. So the way potatoes work, and most, you know, vegetables work this way, is that they can hold so much liquid once they're done. So if they get to the point where they are really overcooked and they're falling apart, they're not going to want to hold as much liquid as you want them to. On the other hand, if you don't cook them all the way through, then they're going to be lumpy. So you're going to have little pieces that are still not wanting to puree or become really smooth when you do, you know, either mash them or puree them or whip them or whatever you decide to do. So I'm gonna check them here in just a few minutes. I'm gonna see, you know, where they are for doneness, but I really just wanna I can just take a paring knife and just poke at them, and it should go in without any kind of hesitation. Almost overcooked. You wanna get that stopped at that point and get them out of the water as soon as possible then. If not, we'll just let them keep going for a little bit until they're ready to be done. So I also wanna go over what we're gonna do, the steps and procedures for actually making our potatoes. That way when we're ready to go, we can go right into the video of how to make and finish off these potatoes with our flavor. So I've got a couple pieces here. I've got a couple different tools you might have seen around. The first one is what's called a food mill. And what this is the food, you know, goes into here. It's got this little grater on the bottom, and all you do is turn the handle and the blade pushes the food through and it comes out the bottom. So it purees your food, like your potatoes or carrots or whatever you're pureeing, purees them nice and smoothly through. If it's not cooked all the way, they won't go through, it won't push them through the holes, it'll just stick on the top. But all you do is you push it through with this, and you can go backwards to scrape up what's on top and then try and run it through some more. Every now and then you might have to come through and, you know, just scrape the bottom of this off to get the food off of it. You can also use what's referred to as just a plain old potato masher. You know, it's just, you know, something that you might have seen in your grandmother's house, you know, where you just put your potatoes into a bowl and just smash them down with this as well. I've also used, you can use your hand mixer, or you can use your stand mixer for this with the wire whip or the paddle. You know, just be careful that you don't want to let us sit there and just continue whipping with either the stand mixer or the hand mixer, because you can over whip your potatoes and get them really what we refer to as gummy or sticky. So they're not, when you hit your mouth, they don't kind of just dissipate. They kind of hang around and they linger for a while, which is a gummy flavor. But you can use a stand mixer or a hand mixer to do your potatoes. Just be sure as soon as you're done getting them mixed that you stop mixing at that point. So the other things that I'm going to put into my potatoes, and this is just for a standard potato puree. So straightforward, really simple. you can always add other things. I like to add cheese to them sometimes, Gruyere or cheddar works really well. I can add herbs, I can add, roasted garlic, I can add shallots, whatever, you can add other things to your potatoes. Don't be afraid to do that, but this is what's gonna give you just a straightforward, really nice creamy potato puree. So what I've got here is I've got 4 ounces of butter. This is grass-fed butter. I always use the grass-fed butter. I'm getting a lot more nutritional value out of grass-fed as opposed to just regular butter from cows that have eaten grain. Because cows can't process grain properly. So grass is their natural diet. So anytime you can get grass-fed butter, I definitely highly recommend it. So definitely get out there and look for that. But I've got 4 ounces of butter, and that's gonna work for my 3 medium potatoes. There really is no scientific ratio to this. If you need a little bit more butter, add more butter. It's up to you. This is just to get you started so that you can get the process and the technique down. But if you want more butter, feel free to add more butter. It's just that simple. I've also got about a cup of heavy cream, and I've got it in a pan. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually put this on the stove and heat it up. I want my cream hot. I want my butter cold and my cream hot. Makes no sense, right? The reason you want your butter cold is you wanna emulsify your butter into your potatoes. If you've ever gotten a bowl of potatoes at a holiday party or whatever, and you've got that ring of butter around the edge, what happened was your butters didn't emulsify, meaning you didn't put 2 liquids together that aren't supposed to go together. So what you need to be able to do is you need to get that cold butter to mix in, and I actually add it to where I'm emulsifying it with my ricer, my food mill, So when I'm running my food mill, my potatoes through the mill, I'm adding a piece of butter at a time until that's gone, then I'll add another piece of butter. And what that's gonna do is gonna help mix the butter into the potatoes to emulsify it so that they hold together instead of separating out. So make sure you use cold butter. I'm actually gonna put this back in the refrigerator when I'm done with this little section. So my cream will be hot, because if I don't use hot cream, if I use cold cream, it's gonna really bring down the temperature of my potatoes. So I wanna get this hot. I wanna bring it just to below a boil and have it sit there and ready to go so I can add my cream after I puree my potatoes. Also, of course, salt to finish off the seasoning with if I need it. I've also got white pepper. I use white pepper because it's not quite as strong as black pepper. I like the flavor of this in potatoes especially. It's not gonna overpower my potatoes. And then I also have this little guy here. You may have never seen one of these before, but I'm sure you've had it. This is actually nutmeg. So nutmeg is a fantastic flavor with potatoes. They go really, really well together. And I'd like to add this because it enhances the flavor of the potatoes. But what I do is I buy this in whole form, and then I just take my zester here, and all you do is just run it over the zester, and you get the little flakes of your nutmeg. And you can just do this, add a little bit at a time. You're not gonna kill the flavor with nutmeg. You can't really overpower it. You can if you add maybe this whole seed here, but if you add a quarter or a third of this, you're probably gonna be good with those 3 potatoes. So those are just what we're gonna use in our potatoes today. I'm gonna go ahead and get the potatoes finished cooking. We'll come back. I'm gonna show you how to run these through the food mill, how to add your butter, your cream, and then all the other seasonings. And then I'm gonna show you how to keep your potatoes warm while you're finishing off the rest of your food so that they don't dry out. All right, be back in a second. All right, so my potatoes are ready to come off the stove. I'm gonna go ahead and strain these, and then we'll go ahead and run these through our food mill. So let's go ahead and get them strained. Now, when you're straining potatoes, always be careful. Make sure you have a good, steady area where you can pour, because that's really hot, obviously water. And I can speak from experience where I've actually dumped a pot of boiling water into my shoe before. That didn't feel good. Okay. So I'm gonna let that steam just kind of subside. You can see it in the video here as it's rising. If my potatoes are really wet still and they maybe got overcooked, I can always take and maybe put them back into the pot over just a really low flame and just barely stir them up without breaking them up too much. Or I could put them onto a sheet tray and put them into a low oven to help dry them a little bit. Because if they're too wet, they're not gonna wanna absorb all of your food. So let me get my butter out of the refrigerator. So now that my potatoes, they've dried a little bit. Most of the moisture is gone. I can bring them over to my towel. And what I'm going to do, what I've done here is I've set up my food mill on just a 4-quart pot with a wet towel underneath. And what that's going to do, that's going to keep it from sliding around on me when I'm sitting here milling, because I've got 2 hands to mill with. If I had a third hand, I could easily hold the pot, the mill, and turn the crank at the same time, but I don't have 3 hands. So do yourself a little favor, and this works for a lot of things too, where something's sliding around. Don't be afraid to put something sturdy with a wet towel underneath it so it doesn't slide around on you. So let's get some of our potatoes into the food mill. Probably about 1/4 of the potatoes I have here. And I'm gonna add a piece of butter. And all you do is just start cranking it through. What's gonna happen is that butter is gonna start to wanna melt real slow into those potatoes. And you can see, if I have to, I can just go backwards to get them to run through. But they're definitely going through nicely now. I'm gonna actually add another piece of butter. Add a little more potatoes. And run those through. So, if you don't have a food mill, don't worry. Like I said, use the masher, do the same thing. Just do a piece of butter at a time as you're mashing. Same thing with the stand mixer or the hand mixer. Just add a couple pieces of butter as you're going through until that butter starts to melt down. So let me get these pureed down, and we'll come back and I'll show you how to finish these off and keep them nice and warm while you're finishing the rest of your meal. All right. So I finished running all my potatoes through the food mill. You can see there's really just a little bit on the bottom there. Once you pull it up, you can see there's gonna be a lot of it just stuck to the bottom there. So let's go ahead and just scrape that off into my potatoes. Really nice, highly emulsified. All of my butter went into the potatoes, which is fantastic. So now I'm gonna take just my cream here. Now my cream is just hot. I just pulled off the stove. You can see, give it a little swirl. I'm gonna pour some of this into my potatoes. I'm not gonna use all of it to begin with because I can always add more, but you can never subtract. I'm gonna add a little salt because I tasted them a little while ago and they were still a little bit bland. Just a little bit of white pepper. A couple good pinches there. And then my nutmeg. So just run that over your potatoes. That was probably 1/3, maybe to 1/4 to 1/3 of my nutmeg. So let's stir this up. I've got a spoon so I can taste it. And all you do is just fold this stuff into it. I don't want to really sit here and just whip and whip and whip. Like I said, you'll get really gummy potatoes, and nobody likes gummy potatoes. At least my daughter doesn't. So just fold that in. I'm just stirring it with my spatula. Looks a little bit dry still. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more cream. And you just wanna get it just so it's stirred in. You've stirred up your seasoning, your salt, your pepper, and your nutmeg, just so it's incorporated. And I can see the little flakes of nutmeg in there. And that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm looking for. You can see it's really nice and creamy there. Everybody likes creamy potatoes. Let's taste it. Just a little bit more salt. Stir that in. I'm actually going to add the rest of that. I don't have much cream. I'll just add the rest of it. That was just a little bit more than a cup of cream. Make sure it's hot. Remember, you want your cream to be hot. Okay, so now I'm gonna take and I'm gonna show you how to keep these warm. So when I do potatoes, I usually do them a little bit ahead of time, not hours and hours ahead of time, but I can hold them and while I'm finishing dishes or getting everything else ready for the dinner or for lunch or whatever it may be, but I can hold them in a way that keeps them warm. And this is a technique that a lot of restaurants use as well. So it's a great tip. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put these into a mixing bowl. I'll just scrape them out. I'm gonna get them all out. because like I said, my daughter would not let me not get them all out. I'm not allowed to waste potatoes. So I'm going to take and just push them all to the bottom center of that. And then what I'm going to do is take a piece of plastic wrap. So I've got this piece of plastic wrap here that I'm going to take and push down over my potatoes, but I'm going to get the plastic wrap entirely on the inside of my bowl. You don't want to hang it over because we're going to put this on a pot of warm water. So I want to get just it pressed down, and then I'll take a piece of foil. So you can see I've got the plastic wrap in there. It's pushed down around the edges. I've got it down lower than what you would normally have. I don't want to wipe on the sides because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this over a pot. And if your pot is like well, this one here, whatever's hanging over the sides is going to burn and get really crusty. And we definitely don't want that. So now we'll take a piece of foil, just crimp that around the edges. And then behind me, I set up the same pot that I cook my potatoes in. I wash it out and I put a couple inches, 2 to 3 inches of water in the bottom of it. I'm going to bring that up to not a boil, but just really to where it's just a little bit of steam coming up. Really, it's probably 160, 170 degrees, somewhere in that range. And what this is called a bain-marie, or a hot water bath. So what this is a technique that a lot of restaurants use to keep their potatoes warm. So all I do now is set that bowl right over top of that, and that is going to help keep my potatoes warm while I finish the rest of my dishes. So I'll just turn that down to a lower temperature because I had it set already to go. So I can now let that sit for an hour or so to hold while I finish the rest of my meal. If I come back to it cold, or they become hard and they're not really creamy anymore, you can always add a little bit more cream or a little more butter. Just heat it up. Especially I like to use usually cream. I don't want to add more butter to this because we're going to emulsify the butter into it. But I can add a little cream or even a little hot milk into this to help loosen it up and really make it creamy. That's all I do in restaurants. That's it. So today's lesson on potato puree, that is it. Really simple. Now go out, try them with leaving the skin on. Remember, just make sure you wash the skins really well. You're not going to be able to run them through the food mill. You have to mash them, or you have to do them in a stand mixer or with a hand mixer because the peels won't go through those tiny holes on the food mill. But add other things. I can take now and add roasted garlic. I can add herbs. I can add cheese to this. Now is the time to add all those things to really enhance and change the flavor of my potatoes. So enjoy your potato puree. Please keep cooking. Let's keep posting comments in the forum. Let's talk to each other. Let's share our successes, our failures, what's happening, what we need help with. Let's get it fixed. Let's keep moving forward. Okay? All right, everybody. Take care. Get out there and cook because life is worth cooking. Take care.